Hey everybody, it's Forrest. I'm glad you made it back for episode 2 of 1000 Seconds. I'm glad you're here because today is a really special discussion and conversation with a longtime friend and colleague of mine, Dr. J.R. Green. J.R. is a lifetime educator and recently retired from his position as superintendent of the Fairfield County School District. But I think you'll hear and notice in this conversation that JR isn't just going to coast into retirement. His work might never be done because he's always thinking about the next big challenge to solve. But no more spoilers. Let's get right to it. Dr. Green, my friend, it's good to see you. It's been a long time.
It's been a minute, Forrest. Good to be seen.
Yeah, well, I'm thankful that you said yes. I'm glad to have you here as a guest. I want to do just a little introduction in case the folks that are listening aren't as familiar with you and your background as I am. Let me make sure I get all this right. We'll start with not one, not two, not three, but 4 degrees from the University of South Carolina.
Yes, that's correct.
You've been a teacher, a principal, a superintendent. You served on the State Board of Education. 2020, University of South Carolina honored you as its outstanding Black alumnus. 2021, South Carolina Superintendent of the Year. 2024, Association of School Administrators Lifetime Achievement Award. I know because I know you personally that you're also an alpha man, that you and your wife, Tanya, are the parents of 3 wonderful girls. Man, grab a chair, man. Sit down. Take a break. Take a break. That's a lot. And we're officially retired now. Is that right?
As of June 30th.
Wow. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I know that your work is not done, but we can add the designation retired now for a minute, and it's well earned, well earned. JR, in that whole course and sequence of the intro I gave, do you remember where and how we first met?
So, Forrest, we first met during the time that I was, I think, an assistant superintendent in Chesterfield County.
That sounds right to me.
And you were working with the South Carolina campaign to prevent teen pregnancy.
That sounds right.
There was an initiative to address teen pregnancy issues in Fairfield County, which led the campaign to come and meet with me because we were trying to curb some of the trends there in Chesterfield. And I went from being someone who had been relatively unfamiliar with the campaign to serving on the campaign's board.
That's right.
So I had opportunity to work with you very closely over many years. And we were all sad and quite honestly surprised when you announced your resignation and that you would be you'd be moving on to some other things. But for us, that is so similar to my story in that when I announced that I was retired as superintendent of schools in Fairfield County, I had board members and many others to say, "Why are you leaving? Things are going so well." And I told them, I said, "Well, things are going very, very well. But you'll know when it's time to move on to the next phase of your
Boy, isn't that the truth?
And
isn't
so
that the truth?
I knew it was time for me to move on for the next phase, and you don't have to wait until someone tells you it's time to go.
Yeah.
You can depart on your own terms.
Man, I love it. I've got your current book with me right here, and we're going to talk about this one in a minute. But you just made me think the next book that you and I should write together is about this like exiting on top of the world strategy, right? Like, I mean, there's something to be said for it. There's something to be said for it. Now, I will tell you that the difference here, you exited, quote unquote, into retirement.
Oh, yeah.
I exited and everyone, including my wife, quite frankly, was like, "I'm sorry, what? Like, what are we doing now? What happens next?" And, I had a mentor that told me, "First you leap and then the parachute shall appear." And, that's basically what I did. So anyway, here we are. Listen, you may know, but some of the folks that are maybe tuning in for the first time don't. The show we call 1000 Seconds, so that means at some point I do need to start the timer. We're going to spend about 1000 seconds diving into, some topics and thoughts and ideas that I know you'll have a lot to share about. But first, before I do, I'm going to sneak in a question before we start the timer. Come back to the book for a second. The title, Graveyard to Blooming Garden.
Yes.
Just tell me just a little bit about the title. I know the backstory, but I want to make sure everybody else does. That'll set up the rest of our conversation.
Yes, and so far as for those who are familiar with South Carolina, and in particularly the Fairfield County School District, prior to my arrival, there were 12 superintendents over a 20-year period. It was known to be one of the most unstable school systems in the state of South Carolina. What a lot of people didn't recognize is the state superintendent of education, Jim Rex, was a resident of Fairfield County.
That's right.
On Lake Wateree.
Shout out him and Sue.
Yeah, him and Sue, who was the foundation, who was the chair at that time of the campaign. And now she's my foundation board chair.
Okay.
But Jim Rex had described Fairfield County as the graveyard for superintendents, which upset some people because they felt that was a bit harsh. But as he shared in his foreword, he wrote the foreword for the book, he shared that in my exasperation of trying to create innovation and stability and systems across the state of South Carolina, I found myself not being able to see the same innovation and stability in the county with which I was residing, which led me to say Fairfield was a graveyard for superintendents. They were running through superintendents like they were changing socks, as I say. But 12 years later, we can point to just a myriad of successes, and that's where the title comes from. So
I got it.
Where did that come from? It comes from the fact that it was once described as the graveyard for superintendents.
Welcome to 1000 Seconds, a video series presented by 1000 Feathers and hosted by the firm's co-founder and president, Forrest. In this first season, Forrest sits down with changemakers, leaders, and visionaries who are doing transformative work at the local, state, and national level. This series will give you a unique view and front row seat to bold and courageous conversations with people that Forrest has learned from and worked with along the way. So set your timers, 1000 Seconds starts now.
You know, what's interesting, I mean, as I've been reading your book, as I've been thinking about this, I've heard you talk about it, but I'm going to ask you about it again anyway. I looked over here on the shelf earlier. I know you're familiar with the book Audacity of Hope. What gave you, JR, the audacity to think you were the one to turn a graveyard into this blooming garden?
You know, it's very interesting for us. I was a part of the TEE, which stands for Tapping Executive Educators Program in South Carolina. And in essence, what that was is the state had identified who they thought were the up-and-coming educational leaders across the state.
Got it.
Most of those people are current. Some have all even retired as superintendents. But most of us were assistant superintendents. They may have been one or two executive directors, but doing this, and I think the program might have lasted a year or so, and we met periodically. But during one of our sessions, we did a case study on Fairfield County. And the case study was all about how superintendents have to navigate dysfunctional systems and dysfunctional governance structures.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't a positive case study necessarily.
Oh, no, it was not a positive case study.
Yeah.
I mean, it referenced the fact that Fairfield had 12 superintendents over a 20-year period.
Right.
And in that meeting, I said, Forrest, I would love to go to Fairfield County. And as you can imagine, a lot of my colleagues said, you must be crazy.
I bet.
Why would you want to go there? I mean, that place is eating superintendents alive. And I told them I was familiar with Fairfield because Steve Wilson, whom I worked with as an assistant principal at Keenan High School, he was the principal who hired me as his assistant, and I worked with him for 6 years. He was a graduate of McCoy-Liston High School, which is in Fairfield. He originates from Fairfield. His mother was the cafeteria manager at an elementary school in Fairfield for many, many years. And so I was familiar with Fairfield, and I knew the just the potential that existed there.
Yeah.
If we could just harness everyone in the right direction. And even after I decided to go for it, lots of people told me it was a mistake. Some people told me this is going to ruin your career. But as I told them, I'm guided by faith, not fear.
Yeah.
And so I'm going, and the rest is history.
You know what that also makes me think of, though, JR, as you're talking, is it might be that a friend or a family member or someone at church or something said, "Hey, you're crazy." My guess is even people locally in Fairfield said, "Look, it can't be done," right? I mean, my guess is you had to change some hearts, some minds. You had to change the culture in the school and probably even in the community to make some of this stuff happen.
Forrest, you're exactly right. I mean, and when what you see in the book, I mean, a lot of people think the book is an educational book. I mean, the book obviously is in the context of education, but it's really about cultural transformation. It's really about transformational leadership. And so you're right. Step one was to embark upon a path towards changing the culture, not only in the system, but within the community.
Yeah.
And when you have had that much instability, as you can imagine, it creates a very toxic, dysfunctional culture.
Yeah.
Where no one trusts anyone and there isn't a sense of optimism. And so that most certainly existed when I arrived in Fairfield. And so step by step, we embarked upon a mission of transforming the culture. And I'll just tell you, that involved me spending lots of time in the community.
Yeah.
And so far as I tell people, if it were a barbecue or a bar mitzvah, if it was going on in Fairfield County, if I had an opportunity to go, I was going to be there.
Well, and listen, I have been a couple times with you to the buffet lunch at the barn at the barn, and you can't look up from your plate because JR's gone, right? And the food gets cold, as they say. Like you just know everybody in the room, but that's part of the deal, right? I mean, again, one of the things I have loved about following your journey is that you are an educator at heart. You have spent a career in education, but that conversation for you in particular, it doesn't start and stop with test scores or what we might traditionally think of the outcomes of education, right? And I think about some of the things you pulled off in the district, like the bow tie club and the career and tech center, and now the village. I really want to talk to you about the village, but just generally speaking, like why did all these things that some people might consider to be on the periphery, right? Like maybe didn't directly relate to our STEM program or our math test scores, but you knew they were important. How does that all go together?
As far as it's interesting, as people ask me about some of the keys to my longevity and success in Fairfield County, I point to the fact that this community was in great need of leadership. And leadership doesn't necessarily equate to simply being an outstanding educator. And so you could be an outstanding educator and not necessarily be one who embraces the role of a community leader.
Yeah.
This was a job in which the community relished someone who could come in and be a community leader, even outside of his or her role as an educator. And so that's what I recognized had to happen if I were going to experience success.
Yeah.
And yes, I had come from a background where I was well-versed around the institution of public education. I had served as a principal and assistant principal. Right. I was an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, and I knew those things very well. But as Abraham Lincoln was famously stated, nothing can be successful without public support. And I recognized that I had to rally people around the vision that I had for the Fairfield County School District. And I reminded them from day one, Forrest, of our motto, excellence through teamwork. And I would be no knight on some white horse who came in and transformed our system. It would be done through the efforts of us all. And there is no sitting on the fence. And so from day one, I kept reminding the community, I need you to be on this journey with me. You are a vital component of this team.
I love that. I love that. And I'm sitting here thinking about chapter 6. This is a pop quiz. You know what chapter 6 in your book is?
I don't. Yeah.
You can't lead the people if you aren't of the people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Give me the next sentence to that. I mean, it sounds exactly like where you're headed here with this thought.
You know, Forrest, one of the best compliments I've ever had during my 12-year tenure as superintendent, I bumped into a guy one day and he said, you know, Dr. Green, I've been so impressed with you as a superintendent, but you just don't seem like a superintendent. You just seem like a regular dude. You know what I mean? You are unlike any other superintendent I've ever met. You seem like a regular dude. I said, you know what, Doc? I am just a regular dude. I just
at the end of the day, we all are.
Yeah, I'm just a regular dude who might know a little bit more about school and education than maybe the average dude. But for us, that said a lot. And I appreciated that because from day one, I did not want to seem as if I was this aloof figure.
Yeah.
Who sat top of an ivory tower, conjuring up ideas. I wanted to be someone who was on the ground, who could relate to students and parents and community members. And so I'd have conversations with people in the barbershop, rather we at Dollar General or the grocery store. Yeah. I had people invite me for us to family reunions. Picnics and barbecues and fish fries. I mean, you name it. And so I became a part of the community. And I share with folks that over a period of time, I went from an outsider to an insider.
It's really interesting.
The Fairfield community. And even though I have retired for us and have moved back to my home in Columbia, I no longer reside in Fairfield, I am still a part of the Fairfield community.
That's really interesting. I can hear it and see it in your tone and posture, even answering that question, how meaningful that particular fact still is, right? To go from outsider to insider. That's something you don't necessarily observe. You feel it. You know it, right? Yeah, it's a feeling, and it's an important one. I teased the village a few minutes ago. I that may not be the formal name. I think that's what I know it by. I
called it the teacher village for years.
Okay.
Until we got a cease and desist from an attorney in New Jersey. I think.
Do I need to go edit that out of this?
No, don't edit that out.
We good. Okay. I don't need any letters.
Yeah. We just couldn't formally name it the teacher village because he said that name had been trademarked. There was a teacher village in New Jersey.
Interesting.
And I found it interesting that they even knew what was going on in Winsboro, South Carolina.
Right. Well, by any name, tell us what it is. I have to tell you, this is one of the coolest things tied to education. And by the way, I think, but I'm a principal's kid. I think you remember that.
I know
your daughters and I are in the same large support group of educator children here. But so I've been around education and ideas and innovation in education my whole life. But this is special. Tell everybody what we're talking about.
Yeah. So far as you know, Fairfield County is a rural community. That's probably 30, 35, 40 minutes, depending on where you're going, outside of Columbia, the capital. And what we experience, as do rural communities all over the country, is challenge relative to recruiting and retaining qualified staff because there is no adequate housing. And as I explain to people, I could be the best superintendent in the world. We could have the best principal in the world. We could have the best curriculum and teachers and supportive community. But if a teacher always has to drive 30, 40 minutes to come to me and pass 8 or 10 schools on her way to me, at some point in time, she might say, or he might say, maybe I'll stop at one of these other schools.
Right.
And, you know, and so I recognized that we had to figure out a way how we could get people to reside in the community when they desire to do so. And there simply were not housing options in Fairfield. There were some options, but they surely weren't adequate. And as I explained to people, I wouldn't ask a teacher to live anywhere that I wouldn't have Jamara, Janelle, or Jacia, or one of my 3 daughters live. And so when people would tell me, well, Jay, I've heard of some places that are available, my first question is, would you let your daughter stay there?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, then don't tell me it's appropriate for teacher.
That's a fair question.
Yeah. If you wouldn't let your daughter stay there, don't tell me it's appropriate for teacher. So I started doing some research for us to say, what are some innovative strategies to create housing opportunities within a community? And I went to Hertford County, North Carolina, where one of my fraternity brothers, William Wright, was superintendent at the time. Now he's in Sumter, South Carolina.
Okay.
But they had built 2-bedroom apartments to address some of the same issues that we had in Fairfield. In fact, the North Carolina State Employee Credit Union had extended 0 interest loans to multiple rural communities in North Carolina who wanted to pursue a similar project.
Wow.
So I put my board on, we all got on in a van. We traveled up to Hertford County, North Carolina.
Yeah, for sure.
And we learned about those apartments they had there. Well, after we got back, Forrest, I said, well, that was nice what they were doing in Hertford, but wouldn't it be awesome if we didn't do apartments, but we did single family homes? Wouldn't it be great if we could just take it to that next level?
Yeah.
And just imagine, we have a wealth of land in Fairfield County. There's no reason we need to build stackable apartments. Why not build homes? Well, the board was on board with me, and I got the board to agree to donate a 22-acre tract of land that resided behind the district office, adjacent to the high school, to the foundation.
Okay.
The foundation owns the property, and then we launched our journey to building these homes. Wow. Now, the first question people had was, where are you going to get the money to build these homes? And I was like, I don't know, but somebody has money. I mean, we'll figure that part out. Well, very quickly for us, I ran through Sue Rex. She introduced me to a guy who was an executive with Golick Brothers Capital out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and they invest in about close to $100 million a year in real estate development. Well, we pitched the idea to them. They were totally on board. They said, well, we'll come and build 30 homes for you. That'll be about $3.6 million at that time.
Wow.
All we want is a 7-year tax incentive, of which we could not provide. That had to come through the county government.
Come from the county, right?
They come from the county. Well, politics got involved. Golick Brothers walked away from the deal because they couldn't get the tax incentive from the county. So now the project is stalled. COVID-19 arrives at our doorstep. Right. So nothing's moving. And people thought the project was dead. But it wasn't dead for us. It was on life support, but it wasn't dead.
Yeah, right.
And then after COVID kind of subsided, we had an infusion because there was a $99 million settlement as a result of the abandonments from the nuclear reactors in Fairfield County. Got it. And they designated $2.2 million to this particular project. Okay. So now we're back up.
Now we're back.
Now we're back. And so we took that $2.2 million, leveraged it with some private funding, some grant money, United Way of the Midlands, Central Carolina Community Foundation, and some others. And now we have built 17 homes, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, sprinkler system, washer and dryer, stainless steel appliances. That's incredible. All being provided to teachers at a rental rate of between $700 and $900 a month. And it's really one of the most innovative projects in the country.
That is, man, I could talk about that all day. And I don't even know that I knew the first deal fell apart and then COVID got in the way. And politics always raises its head, when we least expect it, all those sorts of things. We'll do a part 2 to this conversation around stick-to-itiveness,
Absolutely.
right? And getting these ideas across the finish line. My little 16-minute timer went off when you were telling that story, but if you think I was going to stop you mid-story, you're crazy. But Jared, let me wrap up with this. You haven't been out of the game. You're never going to be out of the game. I know you too well, but you've been out of the game for a couple months. You've had a little time to sit back and reflect. As you look out over the future, you just talked about solving a monumental challenge, or at least partially solving a monumental challenge. What's the next big challenge you're predicting for education, or just for sort of children and families, as you've had a little time to reflect?
Yeah. Forrest, the unfortunate reality is that public education has become ground zero for culture wars throughout this
Mm,
country.
mm,
Education for the most part has been a kind of non-political kind of an entity. Okay, it
mhm,
wasn't a partisan. I mean, maybe non-political is too strong because there's politics and everything, but surely not a partisan kind of an entity. Now we are faced with a new challenge around what books can be read, uh,
mm,
what history can be taught.
mm,
I mean, it is you have people now saying that schools shouldn't teach Ruby Bridges,
mhm.
who integrated schools in New Orleans in 1960 because it makes some children feel bad. And if you would have asked me 5 years ago, for us, I would say that's preposterous. We would never get
Mhm.
to that point.
Mhm.
But that's where we
Mm.
are, and I think we are in grave need of a course correct.
Mm.
Um, or I fear it will have significant damage to the institution. I shared at a group that I spoke with recently that Greenville County just recently canceled the book fair
Mm.
that they had scheduled for the beginning of the year, uh, out of concern that there may be some books that may be available to students that run afoul of some of the
Mm.
legislation that has been passed. And when we get to the point for us where we don't want a third grader to go to a book fair and pick out a book to read, um, we got some problems. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think that is the
Oof.
next big battle that's going on across the nation.
Interesting. That's definitely going to take another episode or 2 or 3 to unpack that. But I appreciate you lifting it up. It's interesting to connect all of that back to this whole conversation and our ability to lead and be part of community and grow young scholars and all of these things, right? JR, you're a blessing to all of us who call you a colleague and a friend. Thank you so much for saying yes. Thanks for spending a little more than 1,000 seconds with us today. I appreciate you, my brother.
My pleasure, Forrest. Looking forward to part 2.